The great hall of the Moon Citadel shone like a sea of light. Silver banners fluttered above the high ceiling, and hundreds of candles burned in floating glass globes. It was the night of the lunar feast, the night when every family from the noble clans gathered to celebrate the choosing of mates. The music was soft but tense. Every girl wore her finest dress. Every warrior stood tall and proud, hoping to be chosen. It was a tradition as old as their kingdom. And even though the world outside had changed, inside these marble walls, old customs still ruled hearts and lives. Alara stood near one of the crystal pillars, her hands trembling slightly as she held her cup. She wore a pale silver gown that matched her eyes, but fear made her glow fade. She was not ready for this night. She did not want it at all. Her mother, Lady Morel, whispered beside her, "Keep your head high, Alara. You are of noble blood. Someone strong will notice you. Someone worthy." But Alara only nodded. She was kind and quiet, not made for the games of pride and power that filled this hall. She had dreamed of a simple life, of books, gardens, and sunlight. Not being chosen like a prize before strangers all around her, the feast was alive. Servants moved with trays of fruit and wine. Musicians played soft notes on golden instruments. The nobles laughed, their voices full of pride. Yet under all the noise, there was something else. The air of tension, of eyes watching, of destinies waiting to be sealed. At the far end of the hall, the great doors opened, and a deep hush fell. The Alpha King had arrived. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and cloaked in black and silver. His presence filled the space like thunder after silence. Behind a ceremonial mask of metal and moonstone, his eyes glowed faintly calm but powerful. Few had seen his face, but all knew his name. King Kale of the 7 lunar packs, the strongest ruler in generations. Alara's heart froze. The story said he had the strength of 10 warriors, the wisdom of an elder, and the heart of stone. Some feared him. Others adored him, but no one truly knew him. As the king walked through the hall, every noble bowed. Alara lowered her gaze, hoping to vanish among the crowd. She wished he would not notice her. She wanted the night to pass quickly, to escape unseen. But fate had other plans. The feast began with toasts and speeches. Then came the first part of the ceremony, the choosing. One by one, young women were invited to stand before the warriors, to be claimed or released. The rules were ancient. Once a hand was placed upon a maiden's shoulder, a bond of promise began. Alara's hands grew cold. She watched others step forward, some nervous, some proud. The hall was filled with murmurs and whispers. Every pair formed meant one less choice left. When a tall warrior approached her side, she felt her breath catch. His eyes were dark and steady. He smiled faintly as if ready to speak. Alara panicked. She did not know him. She did not want to belong to anyone. Her mind raced. She remembered her father's stories of women who had escaped their fate by fainting, by falling before anyone could mark them. It was foolish, yes, but her fear was stronger than her reason. Her pulse hammered. Her vision blurred under the heat and noise. Her fingers loosened around the cup. And before she could think again, her knees gave way. The hall gasped. Alara sank into darkness, but before she could hit the marble floor, the strong arms caught her mid-fall. The scent of pine and rain filled her fading senses. She felt warmth, strength, and something strangely gentle. A deep voice said softly, "Easy. You are safe." Then everything went still. The hall erupted in whispers. Who caught her? Is she hurt? Who is she? The Alpha King stood, holding the fainted girl in his arms. His mask glimmered under the light. His eyes studied her calm, unconscious face, pale, peaceful, unaware. Her hair brushed against his shoulder like silk. He did not speak for a long time. Then, to the shock of all, he said, "She will be taken to the royal chambers. She will recover under my care." Gasps rippled through the hall. No one had ever heard the Alpha King claim anyone's protection so directly. Even his council exchanged glances, but none dared question him. The healers came forward. But the king refused to hand Alara over. Instead, he carried her himself, his long cloak trailing behind like a shadow. The heavy doors closed behind him, leaving the crowd whispering and guessing. Alara awoke hours later in a quiet room lit by moonlight. The walls were carved with symbols of the royal crest. The bed beneath her was soft as cloud silk. She blinked, confused, her mind slow to return. Where am I? She tried to sit up but felt a gentle pressure on her shoulder. A maid stood nearby, bowing slightly. "Please rest, my lady," the maid said kindly. "You fainted at the feast." Lara's cheeks warmed. "The feast," she murmured. "Did anyone see?" The maid hesitated. "Everyone saw, my lady. You fell, and the Alpha King caught you himself." Ilara froze. "The Alpha King?" "Yes," the maid smiled softly, almost shyly. "He brought you here. He has not left the corridor since. He ordered the healers to tend to you and asked that you be given food when you wake." Lara's mind spun. The king, the man every soul feared to even speak to directly, had carried her. Protected her? The maid poured water into a crystal cup. "He asked that you drink this when you wake. It helps with fainting spells." Lara nodded weakly, taking the cup with trembling hands. Her heart was beating too fast. She had only wanted to escape the ceremony, to avoid being chosen, and now it seemed she had fallen right into the center of royal attention. As the maid left, Ilara sat still, staring at her reflection in the cup's surface. "What have I done?" she whispered to herself. Outside in the long corridor, King Kale stood near the window. His hands were clasped behind his back, his mask set aside on a nearby table. The moonlight touched his face, sharp, quiet, unreadable. His advisor, Lord Theron, stepped forward carefully. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low, "the council awaits your decision regarding the mate ceremony. Should it continue?" Kale's gaze stayed on the stars. "It will continue," he said, "but without her." Theron nodded. "As you wish, my king. The people are curious, though. They ask who she is." Kale's eyes darkened slightly. "No one needs to know her name." He turned and walked down the corridor, his boots silent on the marble floor. Yet his thoughts were loud. He had not meant to intervene. He had planned to remain distant, as always. The feast was only tradition, something he tolerated, not enjoyed. But when he saw her fall, something deep inside him had moved. There was something about the way she looked before she fainted, fear mixed with quiet courage. The way her hands shook, but her eyes refused to show weakness. He had seen hundreds of noble daughters, all polished and perfect. But she was different. Still, he reminded himself, she was a guest. A stranger. His duty was to protect, not to feel. And yet, when he thought of her lying helpless on the floor, his chest tightened in a way he could not explain. Ilara could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes of what had happened. The music, the dizziness, the stranger's arms. She didn't know why her heart reacted this way when she thought of him. It made no sense. In the quiet of the room, she whispered, "Who are you really?" as if fate wished to answer. The door opened softly. Lara turned her head and froze. The man from the feast stood there, tall and composed, without his mask. His silver-gray eyes were calm but piercing, and his presence filled the room like soft thunder. "I am sorry to disturb you," he said gently. "I wanted to be sure you were awake." Lara tried to stand, but he raised a hand slightly. "Please rest. You are the Alpha King," she said in a small voice. He smiled faintly. "Yes, and you are the young lady who fainted in the middle of my feast." Her face turned red. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. He stepped closer, his tone still calm. "You were afraid." Lara looked down. "Yes," he nodded, studying her for a moment. "You do not have to be afraid here. No one will harm you. You may stay until you feel well." She hesitated. "But, Your Majesty, the ceremony can wait," he interrupted softly. "You are not ready. I can see that." For a moment, silence filled the room again, but it was not uncomfortable. The king stood near the window, the moonlight outlining his strong frame. "You fainted to escape being chosen, didn't you?" he asked quietly. Elara swallowed hard. "Yes, why?" Her answer came slow. "Because I want to choose my own path. I want to live, not just belong." He turned his head slightly, his eyes softening. "You speak with courage." She shook her head. "No, only fear." The king looked out the window again. Sometimes fear is what keeps us honest. For a few heartbeats, they said nothing more. The sound of the wind outside filled the silence. Then, softly, he said, "Rest now, Elara. Tomorrow you will feel stronger." She blinked, surprised he knew her name. "How do you know who I am?" A faint smile touched his lips. "A king knows more than he says." He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Sleep well. You are safe here." And with that, he was gone. Elara lay back, her heart too loud for rest. The Alpha King, feared by all, had spoken to her not with command, but with kindness. As she closed her eyes, one thought circled her mind again and again. She had fainted to escape fate, but perhaps fate had only just begun. The morning light entered through the silver curtains of the royal chamber. The first thing Elara saw was the clear sky beyond the tall window. The air was cool and soft, filled with the scent of morning dew. For a moment, she almost forgot where she was. Then memory returned: the feast, her fall, the stranger's arms, and the truth that he was the Alpha King himself. Her heart beat fast. She sat slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet around her. Someone had placed a tray of food beside the bed-warm bread, fruit, and a cup of sweet tea. Everything felt too perfect, too royal for someone like her. When the maid came in, Elara asked shyly, "May I leave the room? I do not wish to trouble the king anymore." The maid bowed. "His Majesty asked that you rest, but he also said you may walk in the garden if you wish. Guards will guide you." Elara nodded, grateful. She dressed in the simple gown left for her, a soft blue dress that flowed like water, and stepped into the corridor. 2 royal guards bowed and followed at a distance as she walked. Through long marble halls filled with painted windows and moon symbols, she had never seen such quiet beauty before. Outside, the royal gardens stretched far and wide. Crystal fountains sang softly, while silver-leafed trees shimmered in the sunlight. Birds of gentle color flew between branches. For the first time since the feast, Elara breathed easily. She walked until she reached the edge of a pond. Her reflection wavered in the water, pale and uncertain. She whispered to herself, "I only wanted to escape, not to become part of a king's story. Perhaps it was destiny, not mistake." Elara turned sharply. King Kale stood behind her, dressed in dark gray robes instead of armor. Without his crown, he looked calmer, almost human, yet his presence still filled the air. She bowed quickly. "Your Majesty, forgive me. I did not know you were here." He smiled faintly. "You are a guest, not a prisoner. There is no need for fear." She tried to answer, but words failed. He joined her by the pond, hands behind his back. "The healers say, your strength has returned." "I am glad." "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said softly. "You have shown me more kindness than I deserve." Kale looked at her reflection beside his. "You think you do not deserve kindness?" "I did nothing to earn it," she said. "I only caused trouble at your feast." He shook his head slowly. "It was no trouble. The feast is an old tradition I no longer enjoy. Your fainting only reminded me that not everyone finds joy in it." Elara looked up, surprised. "Even you?" "Especially me." They stood in silence for a while, listening to the gentle sound of the water. Then Kale said quietly, "You fainted to escape being chosen. I respect that. Many would have simply accepted their fate, but you had courage to resist." Elara smiled sadly. "Courage or foolishness? I still do not know. Perhaps both," he said. "But it caught my attention." Her cheeks warmed. "I did not mean to catch the king's attention." Kale turned slightly toward her. Sometimes the heart chooses before the mind agrees. She looked away, unsure what to say. There was something in his tone, not command, not charm, but honest warmth. She realized that behind the stories of power and fear, There lived a man who carried silence heavier than any crown. He continued, "The council worries that people will gossip. They think you are to be announced as my chosen mate." Lara's eyes widened. "But that is not true." "I know," Kale said calmly. "That is why I have said nothing. But I will have to speak soon. The kingdom expects an answer." Lara's breath caught. "Then say the truth, that I was only a guest you helped." His eyes softened. "If I do that, they will demand your removal from the palace for your safety. Some nobles see you as a threat to their daughter's claims." "So what will you do?" she asked, anxious. "I will protect you," he said simply. "Whatever they think." She stared at him, unsure whether to feel grateful or afraid. "Why do you care so much?" Kale met her eyes. "Because you reminded me what honesty looks like. Because you fell in my arms not as a court player, but as a real person." Her heart trembled. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Days passed. The palace returned to its normal rhythm, but whispers followed everywhere. Servants spoke softly when she walked by. The council met often behind closed doors. Ilara tried to stay invisible, spending hours in the library or garden, reading about old customs and the history of the lunar pacts. Yet she could not avoid Kale entirely. He began meeting her during evening walks. At first their talks were short and careful about the stars, the kingdom, the way the world was changing. But slowly their words grew longer, gentler. Kale listened more than he spoke. Ilara told him about her childhood, about how she loved music and the smell of rain. She confessed she had always felt trapped by rules she never chose. Kale, in return, spoke of his burdens, how being king meant standing alone, even among thousands. Once, when thunder rolled across the sky, she asked softly, "Are you never afraid?" He smiled a little. "A king who says he fears nothing is lying. I fear losing what little peace I have left." "And have you found peace?" He looked at her then, eyes quiet and deep. "Perhaps now I have." Her chest felt warm and confused. She told herself it was only kindness she felt, gratitude for his help. But her heart began to disagree. One night, a great storm swept over the citadel. Rain beat against the windows, and lightning lit the sky. Ilara sat by the fire in her chamber, trying to read. But her thoughts wandered to the king's calm voice and the way he had smiled earlier that day. A knock came at her door. "Come in," she said. It was Kale. His cloak was wet from the rain, his hair slightly undone. He looked less like a king and more like a tired man seeking company. "I hope I do not disturb you," said. "Not at all," she replied, standing quickly. "You should not be out in the storm," he smiled. "Storms do not frighten me." He sat near the fire, and for a moment neither spoke. The sound of rain filled the space between them. Finally he said, "Tomorrow the council will press me again. They want me to choose a mate before the season ends." Ilara's stomach tightened. "And will you?" He looked into the fire. "I already did, though not in the way they expected." She frowned. "I do not understand." He turned to her slowly. "When I caught you that night, I saw something in your eyes before you fell. Fear, yes, but also spirit. It has not left my mind since. Every day since, I have found reasons to see you, to hear you speak, to know you better." "Tell me, Ilara," I asked, "not as king, but as a man. Would you choose to stay by my side?" The words froze her heart. She rose, unsure whether to breathe. "You do not mean that. You cannot choose someone like me." He stood too, his voice calm but sure. "I can, and I do. But I will not force you. You wanted freedom, and I respect that. So I will ask once, and only once." Ilara looked at him, the king who had all the power in the world, yet spoke to her as if his world depended on her answer. She whispered, "I do not know if I am ready." "Then stay until you are," he said gently. "That is enough." Lightning flashed outside, bright and sudden. For an instant, his eyes glowed silver in the firelight. Then the moment passed. He left the room quietly, and she stood there for a long time, heart racing. The next morning, the palace was busy. The final ceremony of the season, the renewal feast, was being prepared. It was the night when the king traditionally declared his mate. Ilara had hoped to remain hidden, but fate again refused to listen. In the afternoon, the Queen Mother visited her chamber. She was graceful and kind, her silver hair braided like moonlight. "My son speaks of you," she said warmly. "He has changed since you came. He smiles now. Do you know that?" Ilara blushed. "I never meant to cause change, Your Majesty." "Sometimes change is what a heart needs," the Queen Mother said. "I only ask, be true to yourself. Whether you stay or go, do it with honesty." That night, the hall filled once more with nobles, music, and lights. Ilara watched from the edge, trying to disappear into the crowd. She wore a simple white gown, nothing like the jewels around her. Then the trumpet sounded. The Alpha King entered, no mask this time. The sight of his uncovered face silenced the hall. He looked strong and certain, yet there was a quiet warmth in his expression that few had ever seen. He stood before the throne and said clearly, "Tonight marks the end of an old season and the beginning of a new one. Our customs bind us, but our hearts give them meaning. I have been asked to choose my mate before this night ends." The crowd leaned forward. Kale's eyes searched the room until they found Ilara. He extended his hand toward her. The crowd gasped. Ella froze where she stood. Every eye turned to her. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Kale's voice was calm. "I do not choose out of duty or bloodline. I choose because I have found someone whose spirit reminds me what it means to live. Ilara of the House Morel, will you stand beside me?" Silence. Ilara trembled. She had spent her life avoiding such attention, running from the idea of belonging to anyone. Yet when she looked at Cal's steady patient, waiting without command, she saw no chains, only truth. Slowly, she stepped forward. The crowd parted. Each step felt heavy and light at once. When she reached him, he lowered his head slightly in respect. "You do not have to say yes," he whispered. She smiled faintly. "I fainted once to escape fate, but maybe this time I should stay awake and face it." He smiled a small, real smile and took her hand. The hall erupted in cheers and astonishment. The council bowed, the Queen Mother wiped tears from her eyes, and the musicians began to play a soft, bright tune.